Welcome to the Well Off Podcast, where the goal is to motivate, inspire, and share success principles. I'm your host, George Almasri. On this episode, I interviewed Fern Gauthier, who traveled all the way from Kingston to come meet me in person. So I hope you guys will enjoy it. Fern has a really cool story. He actually has a PhD in, I think it was molecular biology, and he was working at Queen's University and decided to actually quit his job and become a full-time real estate investor. So he talked about his journey and how he bought 12 properties in 1 year and did 10 duplex conversions out of those 12 properties while he was working full-time and taking care of his kids during the COVID years when kids were at home and not schools were closed. So he talked about how he felt a little bit burnt out, obviously, from doing that, and how he was able to move on from there and continue to grow his portfolio and raise capital and do all these things. So I think there's a lot of value from listening to his story, especially if you are working full-time and looking to potentially become a full-time investor. And if you guys do appreciate the content, then please leave us a review, ideally on the Apple Podcast platform if you have an iPhone or a Mac. And finally, if you would like to connect with me to talk about multi-unit investing, I just want to remind you guys that I am an agent with Keller Williams. I'm happy to connect you guys with properties to help you guys purchase a property, specifically a multi-unit if it's 10 plus units. So happy to do that. You can go to welloff.ca and book a call there. And there you go. Enjoy the episode. All right, I'm here with Fern Gauthier. So Fern came all the way out from Kingston, Ontario, and this is actually, I think, only the second podcast that you've ever done, right?
That's right.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us. Why don't you tell us about your beginnings, where you grew up, and some of your memories?
Okay, from way back to when I grew up. So I grew up in Sudbury, moved to Kingston about 23 years ago after I graduated university. My first house I ever bought was a fourplex. So I did what was called house hacking. So lived in one unit, rented the other three. So I've always had a bit of a interest in real estate because my dad owned properties growing up. So I was I call it my hobby investor days. I bought a fourplex, refinanced it, bought a triplex, refinanced it, moved out from living with the tenants and bought a nice waterfront home. And that was that. And then we sold the rentals to do a flip and then get out of real estate to have a family. And then about 7 years ago, I went through a divorce, and friends suggested to me, you got to get back into real estate. And I was looking, I was like, hey, I just lost half my money. How do I get back into real estate with no money? And that's when I learned about joint ventures. And so that was the model. As soon as I learned about it, I realized that was the model that what I was looking for. So then I took real estate seriously. Now it's a business, and educated myself. Started to do J.O.B. So that was in 2018. My first year in the business, I did one deal. Then I had a coach reach out to me saying, Fern, what's going on? You're a serious guy. You've done one deal. What's going on? I was in my comfort zone because of my past history. Right. My first deal was a four unit turnkey property, and so that's all I was looking at. We're turnkey properties, and this coach was like, well, but not enough were coming on the market that worked in the JV model. And so her first advice was, well, you got to do secondary suite conversions. And I gave her the song and dance. Oh, that's what I'll do when I quit my job and when I have time to dedicate that. And she's like, well, she sat me down. She says, I'll coach you through it. You're not going to pick up a hammer. I'll coach you how to hire a team, and you're just going to manage the team. And so hired a coach in 2019 and then did 12 deals that next year.
Yeah.
After hiring a coach.
We'll dive into that.
Okay.
But first, I want to get into your background a little bit.
Okay. So
you were telling me before we started recording that you were working at Queen's.
I was working at Queen's. So I have I was a program associate, which means I was running the lab component of a couple of the second year biology labs. So fun fact, a lot of people in the real estate world don't know about is I have a PhD in molecular biology. So quite a switch in career paths.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've always enjoyed teaching, and so that's is part of the fun of it.
Did people think you were crazy when you said like you have a PhD, you work at Queen's, and you said
family and friends?
Yeah.
Surprised maybe. By the time I did quit my job, the business was successful, so it wasn't that much of a surprise. I've always had, this is one good thing, I've always had my family and friends, I've always had good support. So nobody ever questioned that. So that wasn't too much of an issue. Mm-hmm. But it was, so where were we going? Yeah. So now we're Queens, and then 3 years after starting seriously there, I had replaced my income, and so that decision to quit the job was.
Let's recap this. 2018, you bought a property, a fourplex. Then you hired a coach, or I don't know if you already had a coach at that point. And then 2019, you bought how many again? 12 properties that you converted to duplexes.
10 of them were conversions to duplexes, and then two of them were multis.
Two of them were multis. So you basically bought a property a month in 2019.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, at least so I hired that coach. So this is there was a fortuitous thing. The whole secondary suite model. Kingston was one of the last cities to legalize secondary suites. And so they didn't actually legalize it until June of 2019. Mm-hmm. So I'd hired this coach in April, and we went shopping in April, May, knowing that this was coming down the pipeline. So we were getting properties at $260,000 that as soon as the city flipped the switch and turned it on, they immediately jumped to 280. So right away, by the time we had closed on these properties, we closed on 4 properties in June, July. Mm-hmm. And by the time they had closed, the market was starting to factor in that now these areas are legal for 2 duplexes, and the market jumped there. So we started off with 4 right off the bat, June, July, and then we worked about every month and a half or so as one project. We started with 4, as one finished, we've bought another one, and so it's about every month and a half or so we had our turnover.
Yeah, and I'm sure people are wondering, because you just said that you had gone through a divorce. Yeah. You were wondering how you were going to be able to, buy properties. Yeah. And then you found out about joint ventures. But even so, if you just find out about something, how do you go about raising that much capital? I don't know if you had a JV for every single deal you bought in 2019, but how did you go about raising capital? Was it the coach that walked you through it?
Yes. Yeah. So my first deal I did on my own. So I joined a networking group, Keyspire, and so that was, and so our first JV we met at one of their events, and it brings up that chicken and egg question, right? What comes first, the deal, or the partner? This was a case where the partner came first, because I was in the fear zone of, I can't put an offer on a property when I don't have the partner. So I met them at a networking event. We talked at that time over Skype for about 3 months. Hammered out what the JV deal agreement would look like, and then once we were about 3 months later, we were ready and put an offer directly in their name. One of the things the coach changed was the mindset that if we go into the property, we can buy the property first now, and then use that as the bait for for finding the partner, always with the plan B of, if we can't find a property, we can close on it with private money. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the changing factors that getting rid of that fear of, I can't put a property under contract without having the partner first. Getting rid of that. Once you're bringing actual properties and good deals to the table, it certainly made it a lot easier to find partners. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even so, that's a lot of deals to do in a year. So were you just finding deals, getting them under contract, and then shopping it around to your Keyspire group? Is that kind of what the strategy was?
And this is one thing that came with the coaching is also she was shopping it to her group.
Okay, so she was helping you raise capital.
Also helping with the raising.
Yeah.
Capital, yeah.
That's pretty good.
And so we partnered on those deals. We partnered with the coach. that we partnered on those deals.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us how things went. You buy your first one, you don't really know, I guess, how to do conversions at that point.
That's right. That was the other part of the coaching. She was coaching me on doing the conversions. I'm a pretty handy guy. I've done, right, in those hobby days, I had done a flip and so a bit of handy guy and so it's just a matter of learning what the different codes were for legalizing a basement apartment. So that was pretty quick. One of the transferable skills that a PhD from my previous career is you learn how to learn, because that's what a PhD is. You're solving a problem that nobody's ever solved before, and so that's the transferable skill is the problem solving and figuring and learning things. So I'm pretty good at that, so that part of it, of the switch in models, was relatively quick and easy. It certainly also has some comforting factor that you got somebody holding your hand when you do run into a problem. And sure enough, with those first four projects, there was some learning there. The very first one that we closed on, for example, the designer that we hired to do the design to apply for the permit, it took 3 months just to get me drawings. Right, that was crazy. We had already closed on it. We didn't have our drawings yet.
Yeah.
And after 2 months of not getting drawings on the first one, I hired a second person for the second property. And he took maybe about 2 months, and then I was like, okay, I hired a third one for the third property, and she came back in like 2 weeks with her drawings.
Yeah.
So like, okay, she's my one.
Yeah.
Right. That was part of that learning process early on, and this was also in building the team, and so that was an interesting start to that whole process, is learning and building the team was that. And so was the designer and my first plumber that I hired were challenges. I did luck out in that on terms of my contracting crew. I reached out to friends who had contractors do work on their houses, and I found a crew of guys that were relatively cheap, and they really were only focusing on siding and decks at the time. And so I pitched myself to them. I explained, this is what I'm doing. I've got 4 properties under contract, and I'm going to train you to do these secondary suites, and this is going to be a new skill that you can add. So in the winter, when you can't do decks and siding, you got another skill. I pitched that to them, knowing full well my intention was that they'd work for me 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But which was the case for about 2.5 years, and so that was a fun little exercise there. And so I did luck out. I found a good crew of guys that were willing to dedicate their work to me, because finding contractors, that could be tough. And especially once COVID hit, it was impossible to find contractors, and I had this crew of guys working 100% for me. So that's one of my value. It became one of my value adds. We had a problem with a rental, a maintenance request. I had somebody there like the next day. Or and stuff. So that was.
Were you still working at that point, or did you quit like in 2019 when you started ramping up your purchases?
I quit in September of 2020.
Okay.
So the timing was good in that, because remember, I was a teacher, and COVID started in March, and we had so my job was to run the lab components of these biology courses, and we had just finished completely revamping the curriculum. I was overworked and tired, and then COVID hit, and now we had to revamp everything again to be delivered online. I'm like, oh my God. And I knew I had the numbers, that the projects that we had on the go, once they were complete, I knew I had the numbers to replace the income. And so that last summer was I was like revamping the course to be delivered online, but I knew I was done in September. I had a couple of more ducks I had to get in a row, and in terms of finalizing my divorce, so that I can get my name off of her mortgage and do one more property under my own name, that kind of thing. So once I got my one more property under my personal property, that was the last duck to quit the job.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. 2019, I'm just recapping here. You do all these projects. You're still working full-time at that point. So you've got a lot of different things happening. You're raising capital. You're kind of like, in a way, the general contractor, you're hiring all the trades yourself at that point, right?
Yeah.
Not kind of in a way. You are the general contractor on these deals.
Yeah.
How did you find the time to do all that?
It was nuts. It was insane. So it was 2020, right? Right during COVID. Because then the other part is my kids at the time were 7 and 9. And so that first March to June, that online learning was not online learning. At that age, it was homeschooling. So the business was full time. The job was a more than full time job. We were working overtime because we were revamping stuff ourselves. And I'm homeschooling my kids 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
I don't know how I went through it, George, to be honest. I actually came out of it. So this is a good point. So September I quit my job, and then the March, I got an award. I got to present on stage at Keyspire as a story of success. But behind the scenes, I kind of hated it. Mm-hmm. I was so overwhelmed. And I thought by quitting the job, I'd have my free time up, and it didn't happen. And so I hired a life coach. Mm-hmm. That was the next big thing. And, because I started 2021 with, things were going great. And so I started 2021 with this great goal. Okay, I'm at 43 doors at the time. I'm like, what's my goal for the year? 100 doors. But there was no why behind it. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of rejigged my focus. I wasn't so focused and haven't been so focused on growing as much and as rapidly. I've been focusing more on work-life balance.
Yeah.
I pretty much shut down the business to maintenance mode over the summer. Mm-hmm. I just do the bare bones maintenance, and I park the business, and the kids are with their mother half the time. So when they're with their mother, I get my work done, and then when we're with me, I'm with the kids, and we get to enjoy the summer together.
Were you able to figure out why you were doing all this? Did you have a bigger goal in mind, or since hiring that life coach?
Yeah. So, my why has always been my kids. That was the thing, and I made some mistakes. Another thing that happened that same March was my oldest daughter said she hated the business and wanted to go live with her mother because I'm always working on the business. I just used COVID as an excuse you can't go hang out with friends, and I just work. And I was miserable. Mm-hmm. And the kids were spending 6-7 hours a week in the car as I'm doing showings on my own and stuff. And so, it was more of remembering what my initial why was, mm-hmm. To create a better life for my kids. It became more about that. And
so you had them involved, right, in what you were doing?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So on the personal side, the first homework that coach told me was like, Fern, you have to go out with friends once a week, mm-hmm. right? I was not doing anything. Yeah. I was just working, and so there was that, and I hired a full-time assistant. I hired a full-time assistant, so that freed up all that time spent doing showings and the small maintenance stuff. And so that freed up that time. It was about my new why came about getting my time back, so I could be more with the kids. And right, I setting boundaries. You talk about raising capital. When people with capital, when are they available? Evenings and weekends. Mm-hmm. Well, that's when I'm with my kids, right? And so setting boundaries like, no, let's not have our calls on the evening or weekend. Let's have our call during the business hours. I'll talk to you during your lunch hour or whatever, right? So just little things like that to free up my time. When the kids are with me, I'm with their kids. Yeah. It's a weird thing because I've always said I'm this great engaged father, and I remember I'd be at the park with the kids, but I'd be taking phone calls from JV partners. Yeah. And I wasn't really, I thought I was doing great, but I wasn't really engaged. So that's been the new why, is just focusing on those kids.
Yeah. And how do they feel now? Like, do they still look at the business the same way and say, I hate the business? Or?
Well, no. So it's so another thing we've changed is, we always talk about in real estate, you got to reward yourself, right? You got to reward yourself for your success. But I didn't include the kids in that. So one of the things we started doing was, it's rent day. So first weekend of the month, we go for dinner at their favorite restaurant. Where are we going this month, girls? And so that's their reward for their work. And that's how I pitched it is, no, this is your reward for your work. And there we go. Now they're old enough that they're not spending the 6-7 hours a week in the car. I can leave them at home alone. The 14-year-old, she's a teenager. She doesn't want to hang out with dad anymore anyway.
Yeah.
But Yeah, so no, we've come back to being on the right path there.
That's great.
It is.
You had a long journey. You had to figure out a lot of different things. Can you tell us a little bit about your process when it comes to raising capital? Do you have a system that you follow? Are there certain steps?
That's interesting. I probably don't have the best system as far as that goes. I like to think especially in the Keyspire world, I've created enough I've branded myself enough that people know me. I have my email list so when I do have a deal, I'll email it out to the email list. Certainly, let me back up. My first method is to go to my current investors first. And if they have capital, then we'll do a deal, right? So my current partners will always get first dibs. And then I'll go to the email list and shop it to the list.
And most of these people, are they from Keyspire or are they friends and family?
Most are Keyspire members, yeah.
Okay, so you develop these relationships from attending the events, getting to know people, getting to know their goals. You add them to your list. You probably ask questions and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And yeah, that's right. That's exactly it. Early on, what I'd do is instead of showing up with a property under contract, because I was scared to do that, I'd show up with examples of the kinds of deals that I'm looking at, right? And I'd write a big sold on it to make it look like it's not available. There's little marketing tricks there and stuff, right? So I'd do that kind of thing. But I learned that was, I learned that, when I'm pitching a deal at a conference or something, I'm not really pitching that deal. I'm pitching the start of the conversation for the next deal. People don't usually get married on the first date. That's only twice that I do a deal where the person that had here's the deal, and they did that deal. Right. Only twice has that happened for me. But it's usually, it starts the conversation for the next deal. In terms of friends and family, the coaching I got there was, and it's true, even though I had a respectable job, your friends and family know you as the snotty-nosed kid they grow up with, right? They don't know you as this real estate expert. And then who are you to be this real estate expert when you're in a completely different field before? So it's, right. Although there's credibility there's not credibility in that market. There's a weird.
Well, at this point, there must be credibility after.
There is, and I have had friends. Once I was established, I have had friends reach out. Unfortunately, I couldn't put a deal under their nose. So that was a case where I went back in 2022. I went back to the whole deal or partner first. I went back to the partner first because I couldn't find deals in 2022, and so I had a couple of people that reached out and so we signed letters of intent. But I never did get a property under the nose.
So I'm assuming your process is probably pretty similar to what a lot of people do. You meet someone by bringing a deal sheet, like you said, to an event. You collect their information or whatever, exchange information. When you go home, you probably try to set up a call. You ask questions. You find out a little bit about what their goals are, what their needs are. From there, if they say yes, they want to move forward, you probably sign a letter of intent, and then you kind of move on from there to getting the property and the joint venture agreement and all that, right?
Yeah. Pre-2020, there wasn't even a need for a letter of intent because deals were coming pretty quickly. So we'd go right to here's a deal. Are you in or not, kind of thing. But you're right. I learned that at the networking events, the pitches for a meeting, right? So, like you said, after the event, set up a meeting, so that would be that step. And then once we have that meeting, it's like, and that's a bit some advice I've given a lot recently is approach things from a standpoint of service. And in order to do that, you need to find out what their goals are. Many people I've talked to who, what's your goal? Well, I want to retire in 2 years. I can't retire you in 2 years. Real estate is a get rich slow scheme, not a get rich quick scheme, right? 2021 might have been a different there, but so yeah, it's like if somebody doesn't have realistic expectations, I can't if you've got 150,000 to start off with, I can't replace your income in 2 years with
Right.
starting with $150,000, right? So
Yeah.
you do have to find out what their goals and needs are. Most people, it's cash flow, but not everybody. But it needs to be realistic levels of cash flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's great that you've been able to accomplish so much in such a short period of time. Since then, where have you taken the business? And also, obviously, the market has changed quite a bit in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Have you found it harder to raise capital, or do you have established such a strong core that you're able to raise it quickly?
I found it harder to raise capital because it's harder to find the deals that meet their needs.
Mm-hmm.
So is it harder to raise capital, or is it harder to find the deals? I think it's more harder to find the deals. I find most of my investors are looking for cash flow, mainly because I think they're coming up with that investment from a line of credit, and so they need cash flow to pay the interest on the line of credit. And with interest rates having gone up, cash flow is diminished, and so I've lost a lot of those investors. So there's that challenge. That's coming back though, right? Interest rates have started to come down, property values have come down, and I think the next wave that I'm going to be looking at is tertiary ADUs, third units. And so with a third unit, the cost of entry is going to be higher, but then the cash flows you'll get the cash flow from that third unit. So that's my next thing I'm looking at. The other thing I did dabble in 23. I tried to pivot. I looked at. It's always been a goal of mine to get into the cottage rental market. Mm-hmm. And so I did buy a property with a group of people in 23, and that was a learning experience. It was in Halliburton, and a couple of things. So the market became saturated, so there was that challenge with it. And then the other challenge was, here I was, my strength was building a team, and we got a workforce of about 1,000 people there, and so we were able to find a cleaner that would do a transition on a weekend, and mm-hmm. that pretty much killed us. So we sold that, so it took a little bit of a loss there. The other place I looked at transition in 23 was into the bigger so small commercial multis, residential. So I looked at a 13-unit building there. Did some due diligence on it, and so that was so. I always look at these things. That's the learning lesson. So, and this one, as we did our appraisal on it, the plan on it was to go through MLI Select to get a 4 to 5 year amortization, and with the appraisal, they'd only give us a 35 year. And so it took it from being a home run deal that we were going to get all the money back in about a year and a half to we'd still leave $100,000 or $150,000 in it. So it took it from a home run to a double. Doubles are still good, mm-hmm. But we had to go back to the investors because it was my first stab in that area niche. I was too scared to. Now we were up against the deadline of financing. I was too scared to waive that condition, ask for an extension, and the sellers wouldn't give it to us. And my learning there is that was a nightmare of a negotiation on that one. We probably negotiated that one 4 months. Mm-hmm. And we had agreed a price early on. What they were stickling on was they would come back with us with hard dates for the conditions, but they just ignored the irrevocable clause, usually 24, 48 hours. They just ignore that. They'd get back to us in like 3 weeks, mm-hmm. with hard dates. Well, we just lost 3 weeks. so yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and we would want like 60 days after goes firm, the offer goes firm and stuff like that. And so that's where we niggled on. And so what I learned, is that multi-space, it's not about, 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 it's not about about if things go wrong. It's usually when things go wrong that you need to have a seller that's going to be willing to work with you. And that should have been my sign when the negotiations were so difficult.
Yeah.
That should have been my sign to walk away then. There we go. So we ended up walking away after like $14,000 of due diligence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a little expensive lesson, but you got to take your lessons.
And since then, you haven't looked at any other multis, like commercial multifamily?
No, I haven't.
No, that was it. You were done with it?
Well, I also did 23 was a tough year. I also did a flip that we were done the renovation end of 22, but then it sat on the market for 7-8 months. And this was a triplex. As we know, as investors, we would much rather have if we're going to buy an income property, we'd much rather get it vacant than rented. So I left it vacant, trying to sell it vacant.
In Kingston as well?
In Kingston, yeah. And so the carrying costs, I'm getting hit with carrying costs, $5,000 a month on this place. And so so when you talk 7-8 months at $5,000 a month, that one hurt too.
You took a loss on that.
Yeah. So 2023 was tough.
Yeah, well,
I'm a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It's caused me to be a little bit gun shy right now. But
sure,
it is what it is.
Well, if you look at it this way, you deviated from your strategy in 2023. You tried different things that you hadn't done before. Cottage, commercial multifamily, and then you sold a triplex for like a flip. That's not your bread and butter, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's understandable why.
Well, that flip, right? Remember, my plan with that triplex was for it to be a JV, and that's when I realized when I was pitching it on the acquisition side, people wanted cash flow, and then with the new interest rates now, it was the cash flow wasn't sexy enough.
Yeah,
that was the feedback I was getting. I was like, okay, the plan B is always close with it with private money. So private money is expensive, so that's why the carrying costs were what they were, and then there we go. So,
yeah.
So,
but learning lessons, right? We all. I think most people took a loss of some sort in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like I know I did as well on a property. I bought a place in Hamilton off a wholesaler for an amazing price, and then the original plan for us was there was some water damage. There was a big hole in the ceiling, in the roof. So we were gonna fix that all up, replace some of the joists that were rotted and whatnot. But I have some partners on. I got some partners on it, and they ended up wanting to go a bit of a different direction, and I kind of went with it instead of taking the lead on that one, which was a mistake in hindsight. But we ended up gutting the whole place, rebuilding all the joists, doing all sorts of work to it. It was the biggest project that I've ever done. Right, just clearing everything out of that place. And we ended up taking a bit of a loss. It wasn't a huge thing, but I learned a lot from it. And to this day, I still take some of those lessons and I've applied them to other projects. So it was a win in that sense, although it didn't feel like it at the time, right? But it happens.
It's interesting, right? So a couple of things I'm thinking of. One is we met at Durham REI.
Yep.
And Quentin, one thing that Quentin D'Souza frequently asks is, who are my full-time investors? And then he tells us to put our hand down if you haven't been through a full market cycle yet.
Yeah.
And now I've learned why.
Yeah.
Right? So, hey, now I can say I'm a full-time investor. I'm really a full-time investor because I've been through a full market cycle now. That's
true.
And I understand why, yeah.
Yeah. I got my real estate license as a realtor in 2013.
Yeah.
So from that point up until 2022, all I saw was just an upward trend.
Yeah.
Every year prices had increased. We had maybe 1 year where it went up just a little bit, but it was double-digit increases pretty much every year from then. And now I can honestly say I've been through a kind of a tough time, right, as an investor. So it's good for us.
And then in 2021, a monkey could have made money in real estate, right?
Exactly.
Just pick there you go.
Anyone, for sure. You just buy any property, just hold it for a few months and you're up.
Yeah.
It's better though for us to go through this and have this experience because I think all of us are going to come out being better.
Yeah.
All right, cottage. That was an interesting thing about buying in a small town. I don't know too much about short-term rentals. I've never done it myself, but I never thought about how if you're in a really small town, it's hard to find cleaners. It's hard to find people to work on your properties.
And it also took 3 months for me to find a small repair maintenance guy.
Yeah.
And so all of my properties are in Kingston. One of my reasons all my properties are in Kingston is I do have a fear of investing outside my market.
Yeah.
Because what happens if something goes wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And those first 3 months before I found a maintenance guy, I was living my fear because when something did go wrong, I had to drive 3 hours each way
Yeah.
to go fix a leaky faucet.
Yeah.
Right? It's like something little. And I'm like, oh, I'm living my fear. So I got to be aware. We all know the comfort zone is your kiss of death. And so you do have to get outside and face your fears. But so I'm acutely aware that that's a fear area for me, investing outside, which I need to consider that. But anyway, yeah, so it's.
I appreciate that you did share that, it wasn't all just great things that happened, that there were some challenges. I think we often hear people's success stories, and it's kind of nice to hear that not really nice to hear, but it's good to hear that, people who have achieved a lot have also gone through struggles, right?
I think it's important to hear because, with Facebook, people post all their successes. And so it's you can fall in the trap of comparing yourself to others. Mm-hmm. Well, they're only posting the tip of the iceberg. You don't see all the crap they're going through under the water, right?
Right.
So I think it is important to talk about those things.
Yeah. Moving forward, do you think you're going to slow down a little bit, or do you see yourself buying 12 properties a year or more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't see myself so this is another comfort. I got to check myself on this one because I'm a little bit back in, as your comfort zone grows, as you grow, your comfort zone grows. And then now I'm in a different, bigger comfort zone. And it's like, I'm comfortable now. Mm-hmm. And that's not a good place to be.
Yeah.
And so on the one side of me is like, no, I don't think I'll do 12 a year again. Because that was, like I said, I came through that. I was worn out and overwhelmed and hated the business. So, there's the new outside the comfort zone. I think I developed a little bit of a fear of success. Because success equated to pain. I think I've overcome that now, but, I'm not, I'm not really money motivated. I'm accomplishment motivated. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm not gonna lie, I'm struggling a little bit finding, what's my next level. Like 100 doors is not a sexy accomplishment for me.
Yeah. It's just a number, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really mean that much.
Yeah. So that one's a struggle.
Oh, do you have a cash flow goal? Like you said, most of your JV partners want cash flow. Mm-hmm. Have you pinpointed what you want exactly?
Right. So cash flow, I'd like to get back to where we were in 21 as far as cash flow goes, not going to lie.
Yeah.
Not going to lie. Right. So cash flow has definitely shrunk the last couple of years. So it's nice that rates are coming down again. I saw an interesting presentation a couple months ago, and when we run our numbers, be careful about factoring in rate cuts into your projections. Mm-hmm. Rate cuts, you think of those as a bonus.
Exactly.
You can't project based on rate cuts. That said, market rents have gone up, and so even before these recent rate cuts, the cash flow is coming back. This is one thing I've been fortunate in Kingston. So I've always had lots of cash flow, and that was my cherry or carrot that I could always dangle. We're still cash flow positive. We're not underwater like the GTA mm-hmm. is right now. So that's still okay. But yeah, it's coming back. It was funny a year and a half ago, I had last April, right in the middle of tax season, I had 11 transitions. Mm-hmm. I was going nuts. 11 transitions. And so I was, complaining about how busy I was again and stuff. And then as I was renting them at I was already at top end market rents, and now I'm getting $300-400 more a month on all of these places. And I'm like, okay, all these transitions aren't so bad. Now I'm praying for transitions.
Yeah, exactly.
So the cash flow is coming back. But I think, come September when I start to, I'm on maintenance mode right now. But come September, when I start to ramp up again, I'm going to really start looking at properties that have a garage or something that I could put a third unit. And that's going to be what's going to bring cash flow back.
Yeah. One more thing I want to ask you about when it comes to your JVs. It sounds like almost all of your properties have JVs on them. Is that right?
All of them, yeah.
How do you feel about that now that you've owned them for a couple of years? Do you feel like, you'd want to buy them out and just have them for yourself, or are you okay with splitting it? Because when you think about it, like, you are splitting half the property, and sometimes it feels like you do so much work to get half, right?
I do a lot. You're right. I am doing a lot of work for the half of the profits. I start to smile because when I first started, some other advice I got was, don't do JVs. It's the most expensive money. JV is the most expensive money. Much rather pay 15% interest than 50% equity. Well, if you look at all the people that got into real trouble the last year or so, it's all the people that were paying 15% interest.
Yeah.
My worst case scenario is if we had to sell, would have 100,000 profit.
Right.
That's my worst case scenario right now.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty thankful I went the JV route.
Yeah.
Right. That triplex that I ended up closing with private money, I'm the only one that lost it on that. No partner lost on that. So I can sleep very well at night knowing that I don't have to make any of those scary phone calls.
Yeah, exactly. That's the really nice thing about having joint venture partners. It's the fact that you're splitting the risk as well, right? Like
splitting the risk, and if I don't come back, remind me. We're splitting the risk, but it's also we're getting traditional financing, a lender financing, right?
Yeah.
And we're putting 20% equity in, right? These people that are closing with 100% financing at 15% interest, over leveraged at high interest. That's the killer.
That's a scary place to be.
That is. What was the thing I was gonna? I forgot it. I knew I was gonna do that. I always do that. But anyway,
maybe if you remember, we'll come back to it. Most of the people that I've been talking to here have mentioned being unhappy with Ontario and wanting to go invest somewhere else, whether it's Alberta, the US somewhere. Is that something do you feel the same way, or are you happy investing here?
Well, I've done well investing here. It's absolutely frustrating and dealing with the LTB. The LTB is broken. Let's face it. A couple of thoughts. One, everybody's investing in Edmonton. Everybody's investing in the US right now. What does Warren Buffett say? Right, when people are greedy, be fearful. Be fearful and fearful. Right, everybody's going do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. So, if everybody's going there, maybe it's time to start looking here again for deals, because that means if 75% are gone, that means I have 75% less people to compete with.
Yeah.
So that's my one thought there. I still am dealing with my fear of investing outside, so that I haven't come to a solution on that one. So that's why when I say looking forward, I'm looking at ADUs, that would be in Kingston. So, although there's also the thing of watch out for, this is advice I got from my initial coaches, watch out for the shiny objects. Everybody's going after this new shiny object.
Yeah.
Be careful chasing the shiny object.
I agree with you 100%.
That was the thing that caught me in the cottage, right? Everybody was getting into short-term rentals. But by the time I chased the shiny object, it was oversaturated.
Yeah, I this is just a personal belief, but I think that if you just do one thing really well, and even though it gets really boring maybe, and you just do that over and over, you're going to be so much better off than if you try to dabble in all these different ways, right? And I understand that some people want to diversify, and maybe you get short-term income here and then you have your long-term wealth there, but I don't know, I still believe just do one thing.
Yeah. Oh, yes, some advice. That was one thing I've always gotten is, become an expert at your specific niche. But once you've become an expert, then you can dabble. And so, right?
Yeah.
But and right on the cottage side, the model was supposed to be a burr. Like my model is doing burrs, and so it was what I was chasing was to do a burr on a cottage.
In case anyone doesn't know what a burr is, buy, renovate, rent, refinance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And repeat because you're refinancing.
Yeah.
You're getting money. But because there was a group of us all at the same level, kind of experience in the residential market, and we were all as a group pivoting into the cottage market, and so, but we were getting impatient that we couldn't find the perfect property, so we we deviated from the model that we had all signed up for, and bought a turnkey, and so we financed a turnkey property, and then we weren't renting it as much as we needed, and so
what year was that again?
So that's one thing I wanted, because you'd mentioned that on your deal you had partners that wanted to do something, and and that's kind of what happened with me on the cottage. We deviated. We all wanted to do a burr on a cottage, and then one of the group found a really good turnkey cottage and convinced the rest of us to jump in, and it ended up biting us.
That's the part about when you partner with people. I think there should be just one person in charge.
Yeah. And
if you do partner like with others who have experience, who've done all sorts of different things in real estate, sometimes things don't work out as well because, your way is different from theirs, and it just becomes a little bit harder to align everyone and do it the same way.
Yeah. And that's why in my JV agreement, and if it comes to what renovations are being done and those types of decisions, I have the say. Because if I'm going to be projecting certain numbers, then we have to do it my way.
Yeah.
Right. If you make me go do something different, well, I can't guarantee my way anymore.
Exactly.
Can't use the word guarantee, but I can't. Right. Like. So I do have that clause in there, and I've turned down money when people have said, "Oh, I don't like how you do this. Can we do it this way?" And I'm like, "Nope."
Yeah. And can I jump in and bring my people to do these things or those things or whatever, right? Yeah. We've covered a lot. Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. That's a good one. For me, coaching has always been if you're starting a question that comes out, or if I'm just starting out, what should I do? Get coaching. Like I wouldn't be here if I.
Can you share who that was?
It was Mandy Branham.
Yeah.
The JV Queen.
Yep. I remember there was a connection between the two of you guys. You guys were doing deals together at one point or whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's a great piece of advice for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on that?
Yeah, and I've gotten into running lately, and it's the run your own, and this ties into the the whole Facebook thing of people posting success, and you can get bogged down comparing yourself to what other people are doing, and run your own race. I've gotten into running with my brothers. We do a triathlon every year, and every once in a while, I don't know if you follow me. Every once in a while, I'll do a running video. There's a lot of similarities between training with an athletic event and being an entrepreneur. And this summer, I normally with the triathlon, you start with a swim and a mass start. And this summer I did a run. It was just a 5K run, and so that was my first time doing a mass start in a run. Now I'm not the best runner. I'm a 5:50 per kilometer runner, and my first kilometer in this race was 4 minutes. I was too fast. So dead.
Yeah.
And so the analogy is you got to run your own race. If you're comparing yourself to others in business, you're comparing yourself to others that are posting all their successes on Facebook. You're going to burn yourself out, and,
for sure.
and you'll get in your head, and that's it. So run your own race.
Yeah. I've actually, so when I've been on other podcasts and they ask me to share advice, I share that, or like the best advice that was given to me, I shared that exact thing, because we've all been caught in a situation where we look at other people and think, well, I wish I had as many doors as they have, or I wish my business looked like theirs or whatnot. But you don't know what's going on, first of all, behind the scenes. And second of all, your goals and your life is totally different. So why do you compare?
And then there's some of those people that I wish I'd been like them are in trouble right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Fern, I appreciate you sharing all this. Do you are you offering anything, any services, and what would be the best way to contact you?
Well, one of my goals this year is to start, here's me being here. I mentioned to you this is one of my goals this year, is to just be more active in doing podcasts and getting on other people's stages right now. And so that's, if you're running a podcast and you're looking for somebody to interview, I'm available for that. As I said, my main focus September. Once things ramp up again, I'm going to start looking at ADUs in Kingston. So if you're going to be looking for to partner with an expert in which will be a cash rolling deal in the Kingston market, one of the best markets in Canada, I think, we can certainly talk about that. How to reach me? One of the nice things of having a unique name is I'm pretty easy to find on social media. So you can just search me up, Fern Gauthier. You'll find my Facebook. You can reach me out there. And we can go from there. Or you can reach me at my email address is my first name, fern@propertysense.ca.
Yeah. Just a really quick thing before we end things here, but I had reached out to you probably a year ago, or if not more, and said, just ask if you wanted to be on the podcast, and you just ignored me.
I totally did.
Because you were nervous about doing this, right? So I'm glad that after a while you were able to get out of your shell here and do this. So thank you for joining me once again.
Yeah, thanks. It's like I said, this was one of my fear zones. I'm getting out of my comfort zone and doing this. So
cool.
And that is my goal this year.
Yeah, well, I look forward to hearing more of your story as you progress through this and do your ADUs and everything else, and look forward to staying in touch.
All right. Thanks, George.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Your support is truly appreciated. And if you can share this with a friend or family member that might benefit from the information, remember, our goal is to motivate and inspire others to take action and to build wealth and to become well off. Enjoy the rest of your day.